My name is Sophia Calloway. I'm 34 years old. For 9 years, I paid my parents $1,950 a month in rent to live in the converted loft room of their semi-detached house in Didsbury, South Manchester. They told me it was the going rate for the area. They told me they were still paying off the mortgage and couldn't manage without my contribution. I believed them, because that is what daughters do. They believe the people who raised them, even when the numbers don't quite add up. Then one afternoon in late September, I ran into our next-door neighbour whilst collecting the post from the front step. Margaret Hollis, 68 years old, gardening gloves still on her hands and a warmth in her eyes that had never once faltered in all the years I'd known her. She smiled the way she always did. "Your parents must be over the moon," she said, "having paid that house off completely." I smiled back, though something cold moved through me instantly. "I'm sorry. What do you mean, paid off?" "The mortgage, love. Done and dusted since 2013. Your dad was absolutely chuffed. Had a little gathering in the back garden. We all had Prosecco." She laughed softly at the memory. I don't remember what I said after that. Something polite, something automatic. Because my brain had already stopped listening and started doing sums, the mortgage had been settled in 2013. I had started paying rent in the spring of 2014. 9 years, 1,950 per month, £210, 600 in total, handed across to 2 people who had no mortgage left to pay, for a debt that had already been erased, for a burden that didn't exist. That night, I sat alone in my flat, my actual flat, the one I'd finally moved into 7 months earlier, and I opened my laptop. I pulled up the Land Registry public records. Free access. Anyone can look. And there it was, the Calloway property. Mortgage discharged. November 2013. I sat in the dark for a very long time. Then I started making calls. I grew up in a tidy semi-detached house on a quiet road in Didsbury. The sort of street where the bins are always put away on time and nobody speaks about money directly. From the outside, the Calloways looked entirely unremarkable. My father, Gerald, was a retired civil engineer who communicated in pronouncements rather than conversations. My mother, Patricia, was a woman who had elevated passive guilt into something resembling performance art. And then there was my sister, Harriet, 3 years older, effortlessly confident, blonde in the way that seemed to carry social permission attached to it, and the undisputed centre of gravity in our household. Harriet was the golden child. I understood this early and unambiguously. The night I showed my father my A-level results, 3 Bs, respectable, enough to confirm my place at Manchester Metropolitan. He glanced at the paper and said, "Harriet got straight As, of course." He didn't say it cruelly. He said it as though it was simply a fact of the weather, as though context required it. What I didn't find out until years later was that my parents had paid Harriet's entire university tuition outright, in full, without her taking out a single student loan. They had told me at the time that she'd received a partial bursary from the university. They'd implied she'd earned something I hadn't. I was meant to understand my place in the order of things. My mother's methods were quieter, but the damage was more lasting. "You're terribly sensitive, Sophia," she would say, whenever I expressed anything that resembled hurt or frustration. "The world won't be as patient with you as we are," said as though shelter and meals were extraordinary acts of generosity, rather than the basic obligations of parenthood. As though my very existence required ongoing repayment. By the time I left for university, I had absorbed a belief so deeply it had become invisible. I owed them something. For being less straightforward than Harriet, for needing more, for being the daughter who required effort. I didn't know then that this belief would eventually cost me over £200,000. I graduated from Manchester Metropolitan in June 2012 with a degree in business management and £34,000 in student debt. I'd applied for work relentlessly, 47 applications, 6 interviews, 2 offers. I accepted a position at a Manchester-based housing charity called Cornerstone Trust. Starting salary, £26,500 a year. After tax and national insurance, that came to roughly £1,750 a month. You should come home. My mother said over the phone, 2 weeks before I was due to move into a house share in Levenshulme. Save money, pay your loans down. The loft room is just sitting there empty. It made sense. Manchester rents were climbing. The loft had its own door, its own small bathroom, a window overlooking the back garden. I could save aggressively, clear my loans, and be out within 2 years. That was the plan. There's just the matter of rent, my father said, when I arrived with 2 duffel bags and a hold-all of books. He was sitting at the kitchen table. There was a sheet of paper in front of him, printed, formatted, formal in that particular way of his that left no room for negotiation. 1,950 per month. That's fair market rate for this area, for a self-contained room with bills included. I stared at the figure. That was more than my entire take-home pay. Dad, I barely earn that much. Then you'll need to budget properly. He didn't look up from the paper. We still have the mortgage, Sophia. Did you think you'd be living here for free? My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway with her softest expression. We're doing you a kindness, sweetheart. Landlords don't cook for you. Landlords don't look out for you the way family does. She hadn't cooked for me since I was 15. But I didn't say that. I signed the paper. I set up a standing order from my current account. £1,950, first of every month, reference. Rent. I told myself it was temporary. A year, perhaps 2. I would pay off my loans, build up savings, and then I would leave. 9 years later, I was still in that loft room. And every single one of those bank transfers was sitting in my records. Time-stamped, documented, traceable, waiting for the moment I would need them. The years moved the way years do when you are not quite living your own life. I worked. I was promoted. Entry-level assistant, became program coordinator, became head of finance operations. My salary climbed from £26,500 to £58,000. I learned charity law, grant compliance, HMRC reporting structures. I became, professionally, someone who understood exactly how money worked. And yet the rent never changed. Inflation, my father said, the one time I raised the subject. You should be grateful we haven't put it up. He said it without irony, without any apparent awareness of how it sounded. Meanwhile, Harriet flourished in the way she always had. She qualified as a chartered accountant, built a client list of local businesses and high-net-worth individuals. And then, just before my 30th birthday, bought a 2-bedroom flat in Calton. A flat whose deposit, I later discovered, had been provided in full by our parents. Harriet has worked so hard, my mother said that spring. She deserves a bit of a leg up. I was 29 years old. I had paid well over £180,000 in rent. I was sleeping in a loft room with a skylight that leaked in heavy rain. But Harriet deserved a leg up. The worst of it was never the money. The money was devastating, yes, but the deeper wound was the silence. The way I had swallowed every instinct that told me something was wrong, because the alternative, saying it aloud, demanding an answer, felt more dangerous than the injustice itself. What if they withdrew even the performance of love? What if I became nothing? And so I stuck quiet, and I kept paying. And I told myself that sacrifice was the language of Maverly. Then one evening in late August, scrolling through Instagram whilst eating toast alone in my loft room, I saw a photograph on Harriet's account, her Calton flat, styled beautifully, afternoon light falling across the kitchen. The caption read, 2 years in my little haven. So grateful to Mum and Dad for making this possible. Could not have done it without you both. 3 heart emojis, 2 years of free housing, a deposit, gifted. Meanwhile, I was paying nearly £2,000 a month for the privilege of existing in the same postcode as my parents. I didn't explode. Not immediately. But something shifted quietly and irrevocably somewhere in my chest. And 3 weeks later, I found a flat in Fallowfield, signed the lease and moved out. 6 months passed. I was building something resembling a life. Small, quiet, slowly my own. Then one Sunday morning in late September, I drove over to help with the garden. My mother had rung 3 times about the gutters. Your father's knee, Sophia. He simply can't manage the ladder. The pull of obligation still had purchase, even from a distance. I was clearing dead growth from the flower borders when Margaret Hollis appeared over the fence, watering can in hand, a familiar warmth in her expression. Sophia, love, haven't seen you in an age. Just helping out, Margaret. How are you? Oh, you know, getting on. She smiled. Your parents must be ever so pleased, having the house fully paid off like that. I straightened slowly. Sorry, the mortgage, dear. All done. Must be, 10 years ago now. Your father made quite the occasion of it. Little gathering in the garden. Prosecco and everything, she chuckled. My late husband said we ought to do the same with ours. I smiled, I responded. I don't recall what I said, because my mind had already gone somewhere cold and very still. Mortgage discharged, 2013. I had started paying rent in March 2014. That night, alone in my Fallowfield flat, I opened the land registry portal. Public record, free to access. There it was in plain text. The Calloway property, mortgage discharged, November 2013, no outstanding charges, no registered debt. For 9 years, my parents had collected pounds, £950 a month from their own daughter, to service a mortgage that had been paid off a full 4 months before I handed over my first payment. 210,600. I sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't cry. There was something beyond tears in that moment, a kind of geological shift, something settling permanently into a new position. Then I opened my contacts and rang Priya. Priya Nair had been my closest friend since our first week at university, when we'd been placed in adjacent rooms, in student halls, and had bonded immediately over a shared disdain for the communal kitchen. She was now a paralegal at a family law practice in the city centre. Right, she said slowly when I'd finished explaining. Let me make sure I have this correctly. Your parents charged you rent for 9 years, telling you it covered the mortgage, but the mortgage had already been paid off before you started paying. Yes, and they never disclosed that. No, Sophia. She exhaled. That's not just morally reprehensible. It may constitute financial deception, and depending on how they reported or didn't report that income, it could be a matter for HMRC ASW. But it's family. Surely that changes. A transaction is a transaction. HMRC doesn't distinguish between renting to your daughter and renting to a stranger. If they received rental income and didn't declare it, that's tax evasion. A pause. And if someone prepared their self-assessment returns, Harriet has done their taxes for years. Silence on the line. Sophia, Priya said carefully, I'm going to give you a name. His name was Daniel Okafor. Forensic accountant. 48 years old, with an office above a print shop in the Northern Quarter, and a reputation for methodical, unshakable work in financial dispute cases. Priya had referred clients to him before. She said he was thorough, and that he did not sensationalize. 3 days later, I sat across from him with a manila envelope containing 9 years of bank statements. Every transfer is documented, I said. Reference line says rent on all of them. He moved through the pages with the careful efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. And the property records? Downloaded from land registry. Mortgage discharge November 2013. He set the pages down and looked at me over his reading glasses. Who prepares your parents' tax returns? The question landed differently than I expected. My sister, I said. Harriet. She's a chartered accountant. has done their returns for years. He removed his glasses and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. Miss Calloway, if your parents failed to declare this income, and your sister prepared those returns and signed off on them. He paused. He chose his words with the precision of someone who understood what they weighed. You may have considerably more leverage than you currently appreciate. The invitation arrived 3 days after my first meeting with Daniel Cream cardstock, gold lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Harriet Louise Calloway and William James Pendleton Rowe. Dinner and reception at Thornfield Hall, Cheshire. Saturday, 22nd November, 7 o'clock in the evening, William Pendleton Rowe. I knew the name. His father, Christopher, was a senior partner at a commercial law firm in Leeds, the kind of practice that handled the financial affairs of old Northern money. The Pendleton Rowes had a house in the Dales and a flat in London. They were the sort of family whose engagement announcements appeared in the Telegraph. My phone rang within the hour. "Sophia, you got the invitation?" My mother's voice, bright with a particular forced warmth. "Just opened it. You're coming, of course. The Pendleton Rowes will be there in full. All of them. Christopher and Vivienne, William's brothers. It's important we present properly as a family." The word family deployed like a calling card. "I'll be there. Wonderful. And there's one more thing." She paused, the pause she used when she wanted something to land softly. "Your father and I would love for you to say a few words about Harriet at the dinner. Something from the heart, about what she means to you as a sister." I was quiet for a moment. "You want me to give a speech, just something short and warm. The Pendleton Rowes will appreciate it. It shows family solidarity. Did you ask me or instruct me?" "Sophia, don't be like that. It's one speech. 2 minutes. You're a poised, articulate woman when you want to be." I closed my eyes. "Fine. I'll prepare something. Thank you, sweetheart. I knew you'd come through." After she rang off, I sat very still in my flat. They were asking me to stand in front of a room full of people, including a distinguished legal family with the instinct to scrutinize everything, and publicly celebrate the sister who had signed every tax return that erased my existence as a paying tenant. They had no idea what they were setting into motion. I rang Priya. "The engagement dinner is in 3 weeks," I said. "I need you to be there." "As what?" "A witness." Daniel rang on a Tuesday evening, 12 days before the event. His voice was, as always, composed to the point of flatness. "The report is complete. You should see this in person." I drove to his office in rush-hour traffic. The sky over Manchester was doing what it typically does in November. A low grey ceiling, the kind of persistent drizzle that isn't quite rain, but saturates everything anyway. His desk lamp was the brightest thing in the building when I arrived. He slid a folder across the desk. It was thick. "Summary," he said. "Your parents filed self-assessment returns for the relevant years and declared 0 rental income across all 9 tax years. No supplementary property pages filed. No mention of the loft room being let. Even though I was paying them every month. Even though you were paying £1,950 per month to an address they owned outright, supported by 9 years of documented bank transfers, with the word rent in the reference field." He turned a page toward me. "Now, here is the significant element." He pointed to the signature line on a reproduced form. I recognized the handwriting immediately, the careful, controlled loops of someone who'd been trained to be precise. Harriet Louise Calloway, ACA, IKEAEW member number 4471892. She signed these, I said. It came out quieter than I intended. She didn't merely sign them, she prepared them. A chartered accountant who signs a tax return is certifying that to the best of their knowledge and belief, the information is accurate and complete. She signed 9 returns, each of which omitted a significant and documented source of rental income. Daniel leaned back slightly. If this is referred to HMRC, your sister's professional registration is at risk. I looked at her signature for a long time, the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards that always felt slightly like performance. What are my options? You can refer the matter directly to HMRC. There is a formal disclosure route. Alternatively, you can use what you now know to make your own decisions. Everything here was derived from your own bank records and publicly available documents. It belongs entirely to you. I took the folder. The engagement dinner is in 12 days, I said, and I've been asked to give a speech. My father rang on the Thursday, which was unusual. Emotional administration in our family had always been delegated to my mother. Tessa mentioned the speech, he said, and I registered distantly that he'd used the wrong name. Harriet's old nickname for me from childhood, deployed now with what felt like deliberate casualness. Just wanted to say, I'll be saying a few words myself, about the family, about what everyone has contributed. Something in his phrasing made the back of my neck prickle. What kind of contributions? Just acknowledging the support network that's brought us to this point. Recognizing everyone who's helped make the family what it is. A pause. Including you, Sophia. We're grateful, as ever, for your support over the years. He rang off without ceremony. I sat with the call for a long moment. He was going to frame me publicly as someone the family had supported, someone who owed them. In front of the Pendleton Rose, in front of a room full of strangers with sharp eyes, he was going to position me as the dependent younger daughter, present, grateful, indebted. It was a preemptive strike, a public narrative designed to insulate them. 2 hours later, Harriet rang. Her voice was careful in a way it rarely was. Hey, just checking in about Saturday. What about it? Mum and Dad can be a bit... She trailed off. You know how they get at big events. If they say anything a bit odd, just you know. Go with it. They mean well. Do they, Harriet? A short, sharp exhale. Look, I know things haven't always felt entirely equal between us, but this is my engagement. Can we just get through one evening without it becoming a whole thing? I'm not planning anything. Good, she paused. Good. See you Saturday then. After she rang off, I messaged Priya. Something is off. Harriet called to manage me in advance. She sounded frightened, Priya replied quickly. Frightened of what? I stared at the screen. I'm not certain yet, but I'm going to find out. The Friday evening before the dinner, I sat on the floor of my flat with Daniel's report spread around me, yellow sticky notes on the key pages. Priya had driven over and we had gamed out every possible version of the night. Scenario 1, nothing happens. My father makes a vague remark about family generosity. I smile, deflect, leave at a reasonable hour. Clean exit, Scenario 2. They attempt a moderate reframe. My father explicitly positions me as someone who received familial support. I correct the record calmly, state the actual figures, maintain composure. Scenario 3. Full public pressure. They attempt to shame me in front of the Pendleton Rose and their assembled network. For Scenario 3, I had prepared 3 paragraphs. I had memorized them. Each one was precise, factual, and unembellished. I wasn't bringing the physical report. Too confrontational, too legalistic. But I had my phone with screenshots of the land registry record and the key bank statements. I had Danjil's number saved at the top of my contacts. I had Priya, who would be seated at a table near the back, watching, and I had the truth, which, as it turned out, was the only thing that had ever mattered. What if nothing happens? Priya asked, pulling her coat on near the door. I looked around my flat, small, modest, entirely mine. No loft window looking out on guttering, no rent leaving my account for a debt that didn't exist. Then nothing happens, I said. I give a polite speech, I leave, and I get on with my life. And if something does happen? I thought about it. Then I stopped being the daughter who stays quiet. I didn't sleep particularly well. But when I woke on Saturday morning, Something in me was settled in a way it hadn't been in years. Whatever they threw, I was ready. Thornfield Hall sat in the Cheshire countryside, the sort of Victorian country house hotel that smelled of wood smoke and money, with stone floors and high ceilings and staff who moved soundlessly. The engagement reception was held in the oak-panelled dining room, where tall Georgian windows overlooked lawns going dark in the November evening. I wore a deep green dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. Elegant, understated, nothing to draw attention before the moment I chose. 115 guests. I counted as I crossed the threshold. The Pendleton rows occupied the front tables. Christopher was a broad, silver-haired man who carried the particular stillness of someone accustomed to listening carefully and speaking rarely. His wife, Vivienne, wore a strand of pearls and an expression I recognized instantly, the practiced pleasantness of a woman taking everything in. William stood beside Harriet near the fireplace, handsome in an unremarkable way, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from his fiancée. My parents intercepted me near the entrance. Sophia, my mother's smile, stretched one notch too wide. You look lovely. Come and say hello to the Pendleton Rose properly. I noted, as I was directed toward a table near the rear of the room, that I was not at the family table, not placed near the Pendleton Rose. I had been seated by the service corridor, present enough to be accounted for, positioned far enough to remain peripheral. Pryor was already at the table when I arrived, a glass of Pinot Grigio in hand. Her eyes asked the question without words. I took my seat and waited. Dinner was an elaborate affair, twice-cooked salmon, rack of lamb, a wine selection that probably cost more per bottle than my weekly shop. I ate without tasting any of it, watching the front of the room. At 8:30, the sound of a knife against crystal silenced the room. My father stood at the head of the top table, champagne flute raised, looking every inch the dignified patriarch. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us in celebrating Harriet and William. Warm applause, the soft sound of glasses raised. Patricia and I have been enormously fortunate in our daughters. He smiled the smile I had known my entire life, the one that always preceded something. Harriet, of course, has been exceptional in every sense. Academically brilliant, professionally accomplished, and now beginning a wonderful new chapter with a quite remarkable young man. More applause. Harriet beamed. William smiled, apparently unaware that anything was wrong. But I also want to take a moment to acknowledge our younger daughter, Sophia. My spine went rigid. For the past 9 years, Sophia lived with us, and during that time she made a very significant financial contribution to our household. He smiled warmly at the room. We are deeply grateful for her support. It has, in no small way, allowed our family to be where we are today. I felt the room's attention move toward me. Sympathetic glances, a few curious ones, the particular pity of people looking at a woman in her 30s who had, until recently, been living at home and helping her parents pay the bills. As Sophia knows, family is about sacrifice, my father continued, and we hope that generous spirit will remain with us as Harriet embarks on this exciting new chapter. He raised his glass. To family, the room echoed. I did not move. My hands were folded in my lap, perfectly still. Christopher Pendleton Rowe, at the front table, was watching my parents with an expression that was entirely unreadable. Careful, measuring. Sophia. My father's voice carried across the room. We'd love to hear a few words from you about your sister. Every face in the room turned toward me. I smiled. I stood. I walked toward the front of the room. Priya's hand found my arm as I passed her table. I didn't stop. The microphone stand was positioned to the right of the top table. I adjusted it slightly, took a breath, and looked out at a room of 115 faces in candlelight. Thank you, Dad. My voice was steady. 9 years of budget presentations and board reports had prepared me well for this. and thank you all for being here this evening." I let the silence sit for just a moment. My father has just mentioned that I made a significant financial contribution to our family. That's correct. I did. A small pause. For 9 years I paid my parents £1,950 a month in rent to live in the loft room of their home. A murmur moved through the room. If you run the numbers, that's £210. 600 over the course of those 9 years. I watched my father's smile go very still. I paid it because my parents told me they needed the money for the mortgage. They said it was fair market rate for the area, and I trusted them. My mother had gone the colour of unbleached flour. It was only recently that I came across something rather interesting. I kept my voice conversational, almost gentle. According to the land registry, public record, freely available to anyone with internet access, my parents discharged their mortgage on this property in November 2013. I looked at the room. I began paying rent in March 2014. The silence was absolute. "I'm not raising this to spoil the evening," I said. "I'm raising it because my father just stood at this microphone and suggested that I owe this family something, that my generosity should continue." I met his eyes directly from across the room. I simply want everyone to understand what that generosity actually looked like. Christopher Pendleton Rowe stood up. His voice carried without effort. "You're telling us you paid over £200,000 in rent for a property with no mortgage?" "Yes, and you have documentation?" 9 years of bank statements. Every transfer time-stamped and referenced, plus the land registry record, which anyone here can pull up on their phone in 30 seconds. He turned slowly to look at my parents, at Harriet. Something moved behind his eyes. The room had become extraordinarily still. My father seized the microphone. "Sophia." His voice was taut. "What exactly do you think you're doing? This is your sister's engagement dinner. You made it about family finances, Dad." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm simply providing the accurate version." My mother rushed toward the front of the room. "She's not well," she said to the assembled guests, with a desperate brightness. "Work stress. She's had a very difficult year. You know how these things—" "I'm in excellent health," I said. "I'm a head of finance operations. I work with numbers every day. I understand what I'm telling you. This is a private family matter." My father's face was darkening rapidly. "You made it public when you raised a toast to my contribution." Harriet spoke from her seat. Her voice was strange, careful, strangled. "Sophia, have you been drinking? Half a glass of Chenin Blanc, which your server can confirm." Christopher Pendleton Rowe had not sat down. His arms were folded. "Richard." He used my father's name with the quiet authority of a man who didn't need volume to command attention. "If what your daughter is describing is accurate, if rental income was collected on a paid-off property and not properly declared, that is not a private family matter. That is a tax matter." My father's jaw worked. It's more complicated than—" "How complicated?" Christopher's expression didn't change. There were expenses, household costs. Maintenance, £210,000 in maintenance. Christopher's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Vivienne." My mother turned to Christopher's wife with a desperate warmth. "Surely we can move this somewhere private." Vivienne Pendleton Rowe stood up beside her husband. "I think that would be wise," she said, with the cool precision of someone who had made a decision and was now simply managing the logistics of it. I stepped back from the microphone. "I'm finished," I said. "I just wanted the truth to be in the room." As I walked back through the tables, I caught Harriet's face. She was ashen, absolutely still, and her eyes, when they found mine, were not angry. They were terrified. She knew, I realized, exactly what was coming next. I needed air. I walked through the French doors at the back of the dining room and out onto the stone terrace that overlooked the winter lawns. The November night was sharp and clean. I gripped the balustrade and exhaled. I had said it. The words I had swallowed for 9 years, spoken aloud in a room full of people, and the world had not ended. My phone buzzed. Daniel Okafor. Miss Calloway. I've just had confirmation from a professional contact. His voice was clinical, measured. Your sister didn't only sign the returns. She designed the account structure that ensured the rental income was never recorded anywhere. She chose how to categorize the loft room. She made the decision, on each of those 9 returns, not to include it. She was the architect, I said. More than a passive participant, yes. I have a written note to that effect. I'll forward it now. I opened my emails as we spoke. The forwarded correspondence from his contact, a reference to Harriet's specific instructions to her parents regarding how to keep the rental arrangement off record, landed in my inbox with a quiet, devastating clarity. What does this mean for her registration? If a formal complaint is made to the ICAW, it will be investigated. The findings from those returns are already sufficient for a referral. This simply removes any remaining ambiguity about intent. I hung up and stood in the cold, reading the email twice. The terrace door opened behind me. I didn't turn around. Sophia. Harriet's voice. Careful. Stripped of its usual confidence. I put my phone away and faced her. She was standing in the doorway, the warm light of the room behind her. She looked, for the first time I could remember, genuinely frightened. Her makeup was immaculate. Her composure was not. We need to talk. All right, I said. Let's talk. She stepped onto the terrace and let the door close. We were alone. She crossed her arms, but it looked defensive rather than authoritative. The wind moved her hair. She didn't seem to notice. What on earth was that in there? The truth. The truth. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. You just humiliated our parents in front of William's family. In front of everyone. Dad humiliated me first. He stood at a microphone and implied I owed them my ongoing financial support. I corrected the record. You don't understand what you've... She stopped, took a breath. Sophia, do you have any idea what you could be setting in motion? My career, my registration. I tilted my head. Why would the truth about rental income affect your IEW registration, Harriet? The colour left her face entirely. You know, I said quietly. You know, because it wasn't just oversight. You designed it. You structured their affairs specifically so that my payments never appeared anywhere. You signed 9 returns, certifying that they were accurate. I didn't. It wasn't. ICAW has questions. Not because I've raised them, because a forensic accountant has been reviewing 9 years of documented transfers, and the pattern is obvious to anyone who looks. I let that settle. If this proceeds, your registration is at risk, Sophia. Her voice broke, just slightly, just enough. I'm getting married. William's father is a solicitor. If there's any suggestion of, if this becomes a formal thing, they will walk away. You understand what you're doing to me. I understand what you helped take from me, I said. 210,600. 9 years. You knew I was paying rent on a property with no mortgage. You knew, and you said nothing, and you kept signing the paperwork. I thought you knew. She said it quickly, desperately. I thought you were part of it. You never complained. You never pushed back. I assumed you'd agreed to help them. I stared at her. I trusted you, I said. I trusted all of you. And you let me believe a lie for the better part of a decade, while my savings went into an account that had no need of them. The door opened behind her. My parents stepped onto the terrace. My father's face arranged into a rigid mask of controlled fury. Behind them, through the doorway, I could see a woman I recognized. Helen Marsh, my line manager's colleague, who sat on the board of Cornerstone Trust. She was lingering near the door with the attentiveness of someone who had heard more than she was meant to. My father lowered his voice. Sophia, we need to discuss this privately. We're outside, I said. It's quite private. My mother stepped forward, her voice dropping to something smooth and conciliatory. We can resolve this like a family. There's no need for it to go any further. How do you propose we resolve it?" My father straightened his jacket. He had prepared this. "We're prepared to return a portion of what you paid, as a gesture of good faith. To put this behind us." He named a figure. 40,000, he said. I ran the arithmetic instantly. 40,000 out of 210,000. 19%. "And in return? You let this go. No HMRC referral. No legal proceedings. No more scenes." He looked at me with an expression I had seen thousands of times before, the one that expected compliance to follow as a matter of course. We moved forward as a family. The terrace door opened wider. Christopher Pendleton Rowe stepped through, Vivienne beside him, and, just behind them, Helen Marsh. Christopher looked at my parents. I apologize for the interruption, but I couldn't help overhearing. "There appears to be an offer being discussed." He looked at me. "Sophia, are you all right?" "Yes. Good." He turned to my father with the measured courtesy of a man who had cross-examined people for 40 years. "Richard, I've spent most of my career in commercial law. I know what a financial settlement offer sounds like, and I know what it means when one is made outside the presence of legal representation in reaction to a public disclosure." He paused. "I think everyone here should take a breath, engage their respective solicitors, and allow this to proceed properly." My father opened his mouth, closed it. "This really is a private family." My mother started. "Mrs. Calloway," Christopher said quietly, "my son's future was raised in this room this evening. That makes it relevant to me." He looked at Harriet. "I'm going to ask William to step outside for a few minutes. We need to talk privately, just family." He meant his own, Harriet understood. I watched it register in her face. The realization that the conversation happening elsewhere in the building was the one that actually mattered tonight. My father's confidence had gone somewhere else entirely. I looked at him one final time. "Any further communication from this point should go through my solicitor," I said. "I'll send you her details." Then I walked back inside and didn't look back. Helen Marsh found me by the cloakroom as I collected my coat. "Sophia," her voice was low, "I'm on the trust board, as you know. I also happen to know that Karen Price has been considering you for the head of finance director role." She studied me. "What I saw tonight, the composure, the precision, the way you handled that's exactly the quality she's looking for." I didn't know what to say. "I'm not making promises," Helen said. "I'm just telling you what I observed." She nodded once and moved toward the exit. Pryor was waiting outside on the gravel drive, coat buttoned, breath misting in the cold air. "Well," she said. "Well," I said. We got into her car and drove back toward Manchester in the dark. 3 days after the engagement dinner, my phone rang at 10:23 in the morning. A number I didn't recognize. Sheffield area code. "This is Officer Simmons with the HMRC Fraud Investigation Service. Am I speaking to Sophia Ann Calloway?" I sat down very slowly. "Yes." "We're conducting a review of rental income associated with a residential property in Didsbury. Our records suggest you may hold relevant documentation. We'd like to arrange a preliminary discussion at your convenience." I rang Daniel the moment I hung up. "I didn't refer them," I said. "Nor did I," he said. "Sit tight. I'll make some inquiries." An hour later, he rang back. "Your neighbour," he said. "Margaret. She rang my office last week. Asked about the process for reporting potential tax fraud by a private landlord. I explained the general framework." A dry pause. "She was, it appears, not deterred. Margaret Hollis, 68 years old, widowed 5 years earlier, watering her garden in November with rubber gloves on. She had watched me grow up in that house. Watched me mow the lawn at 13, while Harriet went to the leisure centre. Watched me carry shopping bags through the rain, while my sister had her hair done. Watched me disappear into a loft room year after year, and re-emerge for the gutters, and the leaf clearance, and the occasions when I was needed. And when she had learned what had been done, she had decided that silence made her complicit. "Miss Calloway," Daniel said, "are you still there?" "Yes," I said. My voice was not quite steady. "Yes, I'm here. This is out of your hands now," he said. "In the best possible way." The audit was formally announced in February. I learned the details through Priya, whose firm handled adjacent family law matters and whose network was extensive. "Full review," she said, over coffee in a cafe near her office. 7 years of returns. Your parents have had to instruct a tax specialist. Apparently he's not inexpensive. How bad is it? HMRC has calculated approximately £38,000 in undeclared tax, penalties and interest. And that's the straightforward part. She wrapped her hands around her mug. The more significant issue is the evidence of deliberate non-disclosure, rather than simple oversight. That changes the classification. And Harriet? Pryor's expression shifted. The ICAEW has written to her. Formal letter of investigation. Not public yet, but it's on record. She looked at me carefully. She applied for 2 senior roles in the last month. Both withdrew their interest after the background check. I stared at the table. "The wedding," Priya said. The Pendleton Rose released a statement last week. Something about family matters requiring privacy and reflection. William's apparently devastated, but his father was immovable. I didn't feel what I might have expected to feel. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Something more like the end of a long breath, relief perhaps. Or simply the quiet recognition that actions had their own gravity and eventually drew consequences to themselves. The truth does not stay buried. It doesn't care how carefully it was arranged. The email from my mother arrived on a Wednesday night. Subject: "Please, Sophia, I need you to understand." I read it 3 times. She had not slept properly in weeks. The solicitor's fees were significant. Harriet was not speaking to anyone. The investigation was causing serious strain. They had given me everything: a home, food, stability, years of their lives. And this was how it ended. Could I not find it in myself to contact the investigators and explain that there had been a misunderstanding? That it had been a family arrangement, informally arrived at, without any intent to deceive. We could still fix this. We could still be a family. I opened a reply and wrote, then deleted, then wrote again, "Mum." I didn't make the HMRC referral. I don't have the power to withdraw it, and even if I did, I wouldn't. For 9 years you collected rent on the basis of a mortgage that no longer existed. When the truth came out, you offered me 19% of what I'd paid in exchange for my silence. That isn't family, that's a transaction. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to live honestly. If the truth has serious consequences, those consequences belong to the choices that were made, not to the daughter who stopped pretending otherwise. All future contact should be through my solicitor. Sophia. I sent it and blocked her address. The silence afterward was not empty. It was clean. I looked around my flat. Small, modest, entirely mine. No one monitoring my comings and goings. No rent leaving my account for a phantom debt. No performance of gratitude required. For the first time in my adult life, I owed no one anything. And that felt, more than anything, like freedom. March arrived and took the grey with it. Manchester did what it occasionally does in early spring. Produced 5 or 6 consecutive days of actual sunlight, the kind that makes the city look briefly implausible and beautiful. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Sophia?" Harriet's voice, raw in a way I had never heard from her before. "How did you get this number?" "Priya's office." I said it was urgent. A long pause. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not ringing for that. I need you to know that I understand now. What I allowed to happen. What I helped to happen." Her voice wavered. "I told myself you knew, that you were fine with it, that you'd have said something if it bothered you. But I knew, Sophia. I knew it wasn't right, and I signed the paperwork anyway." I was quiet. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just wanted to say it." Thank you for saying it, I said. And I meant it, in the way you can mean something and still know it changes nothing fundamental. I hope you figure out what comes next. I genuinely do, but I can't be part of it. I hung up and sat with the weight of that for a while. Some bridges are not rebuilt. Some shouldn't be. The ICAW published its findings in April. I received a copy because I had been listed as a relevant party during the investigation. The findings were unambiguous. Harriet Louise Callaway ACA, ICAW member, number 44711892. Formal reprimand issued for failure to exercise proper professional judgment in the preparation of tax returns for connected parties. Specific findings: failure to include supplementary property income pages across multiple years, failure to seek independent verification of client-supplied information where a conflict of interest existed, breach of professional ethical standards regarding objectivity, remediation, 40 hours of mandatory ethics CPD within 6 months. 2 years of monitored practice. Public notation on the ICAEW register. She hadn't lost her registration. But in the world of professional accountancy, a public reprimand is not a small thing. It appears on every background check. It surfaces in every due diligence review. Failure to exercise proper professional judgment would follow her through every application and every engagement for the foreseeable future. Pryor rang that evening. "You've seen the findings?" "Yes." The 2 senior roles she'd applied for, both formally withdrew. She's currently doing bookkeeping for a small accountancy practice in Stockport. A pause. Entry level. Harriet. The brilliant one. The exceptional one. The daughter who had always been announced rather than introduced. I didn't gloat. There was nothing to gloat about. But there was something in the knowledge that the world had not simply let things pass, that actions had been weighed, that the careful fiction of the Callaway family could not survive contact with reality. The truth does carry weight. Eventually, it always arrives somewhere. Thanksgiving in the Callaway household had always been American enough to be irrelevant, but the rhythms of the British year carried their own equivalents. Christmas, Easter, birthdays in February and March that went unacknowledged this year for the first time in my memory. I had expected these silences to feel like wounds. Instead, they felt like rooms I had finally stopped renting. Christmas I spent in Edinburgh with 3 friends from work. A rented cottage in Stockbridge. Enough wine to make the Hogmanay fireworks emotional. A long walk up Arthur's Seat in the thin December sun. My birthday in February was dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the university with Priya and 2 colleagues. Candles on tiramisu, 2 bottles of Barolo. Priya watched me across the table with the careful attention she always gave to things she wanted to understand properly. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Better than all right," I said, and I meant it. "You don't miss them?" I considered the question the way it deserved. Not dismissively, not quickly. "I miss who I thought they were," I said. "The version of them I kept trying to deserve. But that version was always mine, not theirs." I blew out the candle on the tiramisu. "I don't miss who they actually were, not even slightly." Priya raised her glass. "That's growth, or just survival. Maybe they're the same thing." One evening in mid-March, I checked my email and found a message from an address I didn't immediately recognize. hollis.margaret1954@gmail.com. Subject line: "A note for you, if you'd like one. Dear Sophia, I hope this reaches you all right. Your friend Priya helped me set up this email address, which took rather longer than either of us expected. Technology is not my strong suit. As I'm sure you've noticed from the handwriting on the cards I still send at Christmas, I want you to know why I contacted HMRC. I've lived next door to your parents for nearly 30 years. I watched you grow up. I saw you helping in that garden while Harriet was at the leisure centre. I saw you at 17 carrying bags through the rain. I saw you coming and going from that loft room year after year. working hard, always polite, never once complaining about anything. I watched that house, and I watched you, and I always wondered. Not in a suspicious way, but in the way you wonder when something doesn't quite look right from the corner of your eye. When you asked me what I meant about the mortgage, that day at the fence, and I saw your face, I knew then that you hadn't known. And when I thought about what that meant, 9 years of payments, all that money, for a mortgage that was already gone, something in me decided I couldn't let it go. I'm 71 now. I've seen a good deal of unfairness in my life. I've also learned that doing nothing when you can do something makes you a part of what you're doing nothing about. I didn't want to be part of this. I should also say, I didn't tell you beforehand because I didn't want you to feel responsible for my decision. It was mine to make, and I made it. You are a good person, Sophia. You always were. Too decent for people who didn't appreciate what they had. My door is always open. I make a lemon drizzle cake that I'm told is rather good, and the kettle is always on. With great fondness, Margaret, I read it 3 times, and then I cried. Not the way I had cried the night I found the land registry record. That had been shock, the cold clarity of a truth arriving too fast. These were different, the tears of someone who had been seen, quietly and consistently, from a distance, by a woman in gardening gloves who simply refused to look away. I typed my reply carefully, Margaret, thank you. More than I can properly say in an email. I will come for tea and lemon drizzle this Sunday, if you'll have me. And I'd very much like to come every Sunday after that, if that's agreeable to you. She replied within 40 minutes. Wonderful. 2 o'clock. I'll put the kettle on at 1:45. Karen Price called me into her office on a Tuesday morning in April. She closed the door behind me and gestured toward the chair across from her desk. The board met last Thursday, she said. There's been a decision about the Director of Finance position. I had applied 4 months earlier. The process had been slow, budget reviews, organisational restructuring, 2 rounds of interviews followed by a prolonged silence. Sophia. Karen leaned forward slightly. I've worked in this sector for 22 years. I have rarely encountered someone who combines the technical rigour you bring with the kind of character I observed at the Pendleton Row event. She paused. What you did that evening, in an impossible situation, in front of people who had every reason to be watching, was one of the most composed and principled things I've witnessed professionally. I didn't feel particularly composed, I said. That's precisely what made it impressive. She slid a document across the desk. The role is yours. Director of Finance. 34% salary increase. Start date at your discretion. I looked at the offer letter. Read the title at the top. Read it again. I don't know what to say. Say yes, and then go and celebrate with someone who deserves to hear about it. I signed the letter. Walking out of Karen's office and into the corridor, I stood for a moment in the quiet, not performing anything for anyone, not measuring myself against anyone's expectations, just standing there, in a building I had earned my place in, knowing exactly how I had arrived here. The girl who had paid rent for a mortgage that didn't exist was going to be a director of finance. Some reckonings don't need a room full of witnesses. 1 year on, I'm writing this from my flat in Fallowfield. The same one I moved into when I finally left that loft room. I've properly furnished it now. A real sofa, pictures on the walls, a bookcase that actually holds books. The window at the front looks out onto a street lined with lime trees. In spring, the new leaves arrive all at once, that particular electric green that only lasts a week, and I've started waking early on those mornings just to see it. It's not grand. It's not impressive by any external measure. But no one charges me for the right to be here. No one tracks my payments or holds my presence over me as leverage. Every square foot of this quiet, modest life is mine. My parents and I don't speak. Whether they're still in the Didsbury house, I genuinely don't know. I don't need to. My solicitor handles the periodic letters that arrive from their representative and sends polite but firm replies. Nothing flows between us. No money, no obligations, no performances of feeling. Harriet sent one email 3 months ago. She wrote that she was no longer angry, that she thought she understood, that she wasn't asking for forgiveness, only to say that she was sorry. I haven't replied. Not because I want to punish her, but because I don't yet know what I would say. Maybe one day, maybe not. I've stopped believing that either outcome carries a moral weight that requires my immediate attention. Margaret and I have tea every Sunday. Lemon drizzle cake, strong Yorkshire tea, and 30 years of neighbourhood history from someone who watched mine unfold and chose, quietly, to do something about it. She has introduced me to her reading group. I have introduced her to online grocery delivery, which she regards with both suspicion and increasing enthusiasm. We are, in the most unexpected way, family. I have colleagues who have become friends. I have a job that requires and rewards everything I actually am. I have Priya, who has been at my side through every chapter of this, and who, I suspect, I will still be ringing about impossible things when we are both Margaret's age. For 9 years, I believed that love required endless sacrifice, that family meant enduring whatever was handed to you, that speaking up was the same as tearing things apart. I was wrong. Boundaries are not walls. They are not cruelty or ingratitude or selfishness dressed up in principle. They are the simple, steady insistence that you exist, that your life has value, that your experience matters, that the people who claim to love you are accountable to the same truth as everyone else. I am not a scapegoat. I'm not an entity. I'm not a revenue stream or a cautionary tale or the lesser daughter. I'm Sophia. I'm 34 years old. I live in a flat with lime trees outside the window and a sofa I chose for myself. And for the first time in my adult life, that is entirely, completely enough. If you're still in your loft room, literal or otherwise, I hope something in this gives you permission. You are not asking for too much. You are not being ungrateful. You are being human. And that is more than sufficient reason to insist on being treated as one. Thank you for spending this time with Serene Drama Stories. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about truth, courage, and the complicated, necessary work of knowing your own worth. And if you'd like to hear about the woman who discovered her partner had been running an entirely separate financial life in a city she'd never visited, that story is waiting for you now.